Thank you for joining us on Wednesdays.
It has been a great experience.
We've analysed, we've segmented, we've priced, and we've positioned,
Sliced and diced.
Stop the silos.
Gave practical advice.
Went all business and leisure.
We talked a lot about recovery best practices. Now it's time to put revenue management back into focus.
Let us help you become future-proof hotelier.
We will share our best practices and advice with you, starting from the beginning.
revenue hacks, back to basics.
Revenue hacks, back to basics.
Revenue hacks, back to basics.
Revenue hacks, back to the basics.
Revenue hacks, back to basics.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Wednesday's Revenue Hacks Back to Basics. Today we'll be talking about the competitor set. So I'll kick off with the introductions. I'm Suzanne. I'm the Revenue and Systems Director from Journey.Travel here in Cheltenham. Christina?
I'm Christina Ridge. I'm the Group Revenue Manager for JMK Group, UK and Ireland Hotels.
I am Bea. I'm the founder of MyOC. It's a consulting company helping hotels to optimize the revenue processes systems.
Last but not least.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Olga, award-winning hotelier, revenue expert and consultant, as well as mentor and St. Julian Scholars Committee member. Thank you.
Wonderful. Just to remind everyone who's watching every week, first of all, thank you for joining us. Comments, as always, into the comments box, and our fab panel will get to answering your questions. Please ask away. So we're going to kick straight off with our back to basics in the comp set. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, back to basics. Right, can we see that? Okay, so here we are, the competitor set. It's a smart way to grow money. Okay, so, too fast. So today we're going to be talking about identifying your competitor set, benchmarking, the tech tools and the KPIs that we should be looking at in terms of our competitors. So we're going to kick off with who are your competition and who decides, stopping those silos, which we've touched on every single week, and it's a subject very close to our hearts. We'll be looking at price versus value, and we'll be looking at benchmarking. So we're going to kick off now with who are your competition and who decides. Bea, what's your views?
Yeah, so that's such a big and interesting topic, actually. I think competitors, we keep on talking about them, but we need to figure out who they are. I think it's not only the job of the revenue manager, it's the job of the whole hotel, basically, and you need to make sure that your sales team is on board, that you have the feedback from front desk, for example, you have feedback from your group's team, you have feedback from everybody in the hotel. So there's few elements that we've highlighted, what is key and on how to define competitors. I think traditionally, the main thing that hotels are looking at is location based, which I guess all of us have experienced in the past. It's like, you drop your hotel and then you look at the hotels in the 200 meters around and here you are. But I think it's not as simple as that. And there are a lot of elements that you need to look at, including distribution and segmentations. It's quite key because some of your competitors may be maybe close to you, but actually have nothing to do in terms of segment. And you need to always put yourself in the shoes of your clients. Do they really care about those 200 meters? Some of the people would probably, but not all of them. So it's important not to look only at that, and to look more at the type of clients that you want to target, and similarly to the competitors that are targeting the same type of clients. So that's one of the elements. Then of course the facilities, and regularly check those facilities. Who has a spa, for example? Who's got a gym? Who's got a new bar, a new restaurant, etc. Those are key elements that clients will look at when they would select your hotel. So that's quite important to look at this. Then do definitely a SWOT to look at what are you strong at, and I think we'll talk about that in the next point also, when we mix like price versus value, and what's the point of view of the clients on what they're looking for when they select a hotel. Style and design is quite important, and also age of the property, because we all want to have the newbies look at what are they doing and how they're entering the market, etc. But let's be realistic. You usually don't really have the same product, because you may have maybe a nice refurb, but you may not be at the same level as they are. So it's all those kind of elements that you need to consider when you define your set. And I'd say it's not really it's the various sets that you need to have, because it's very hard to make just one set that will fit all of those key elements. But potentially you'll need to have a set that is more location based, another one that is more segmented based, and maybe it's a weekend or a weekday set, or seasonal one. But it's all these kind of elements that you really need to think through and make sure that you have it tied up. Do you want, girls, to let me know how you were doing your sets, actually?
I just wanted to just touch on brand, and controversially, who should make the final decision? The brand and marketing, or your revenue / commercial leader? What's your views on that? Brand versus commercial?
There's two sets with it, because you've got independent hotels, and I've got independent hotels, and we've got branded chains. And the branded chains would always say that certain brand levels, like the Holiday Inn Express, is a little bit cheaper than a Crown Plaza, which again is cheaper than a Holiday Inn. All of them are in my comp set, and actually, to be honest with you, there's days in it where I'm actually more expensive than all of them. And I think it should be up to the hotelier themselves to make that decision, or the commercial leader within the hotel, or what we're calling ourselves now, commercial optimization specialists, instead of revenue managers, to make that decision. Because we know our property, we know our product, we know our value, and knowing your value is so important. And doing that SWOT analysis on your market is really important, because you know what, the people who sit in the brands, they're very intelligent people, but there's times in it where they don't actually know where the brand could be positioned in a particular area, be it in London, be it in Ireland, be it anywhere across the world.
I think one of the useful things about brand is having a simple brand map that every single decision that's taken is just referred back to. It's not overly complicated. It's not, a 50-page brand marketing document, but a simple brand map that just has the key points, refer back to it, and if everything has to chime with that, including your pricing, your SWOT, your position, I think that's something that helps. Olga, what's your view?
I agree with Christina and everything you touched upon with Susanna and Branger as well. I would say, unfortunately, in my experience, I have witnessed when in one hotel group where you have several brands, one brand undercutting kind of sister property. So as long as commercial leaders agreed what that value proposition is and how much price variance should be, even if we were just talking about transient market segment, then, and as long as everyone sticks to those kind of rules, even if sometimes there might be some exceptions, if there's a special event and a hotel is fully booked or whatever might be the reasons, but as long as that agreement is in place and everyone's trying to kind of keep within those guidelines, because otherwise you'll be undercutting, sister properties kind of undercutting each other. It just doesn't make sense. And equally, I've seen great examples where properties were owned and the same brand owned by different people. Revenue leaders were completely different, but actually their pricing was so in tune with each other and there was no undercutting happening. So I've seen kind of both experiences. Yeah, some really good examples.
That takes us nicely on then to the whole price versus value. Let me just pull the screen back up. So sharing the screen. Look at that technology. Who knew? Okay, all right. So the price, if you think back to your old marketing lessons where it's, the 4 Ps and, price is always the first one. So the price versus value and where the dangers kind of sit with only looking at your bedrooms as a commodity. Christina, what's your take?
I think for sure hotels now more than ever need to really assess their value proposition in the coming months. Look at their property, look at the properties that's around them. What can they offer differently to the guest? And also, what is it that they've been offering to the guest at the moment, whether the prices were high or they were too low? You need to know what guest expectation is. At the moment, we all know that the expectation of the guest coming in the next few months is going to be very much focused on cleanliness rather than actually discounts. So look at your hotel from a viewpoint of a customer. Start doing some analysis now from the outside in, looking at all the different reviews, be it on any of the kind of review sites, or else using the review tools if you have any in your hotel or available to you to use, and start looking at what the customers are flagging as a really good potential for you to exploit in your hotel, and also what is letting you down, so that you can kind of work on that. Because you could be a 3-star hotel sitting in the middle of a busy city centre, but you might actually only have a 1-star or a 2-star quality. And you could be up against luxury leaders within that market, depending on where you are. So you really need to know what your reality is. Do a full walkthrough, have a look on Google, put in the hotel name, see what comes up, look at all the websites, do exactly what you do if you were shopping for your own vacation, and go from there, because I just think it's so, so important. And I think you need to start asking your reception teams, your sales teams, everyone in the hotel, well, what is the feedback you're getting about the property? Because you can be very cheap and you can have amazing reviews, and that can actually damage you when you try to bring up your price. Because although your reviews are fantastic, people have already put in there beyond expectation for the low price I paid. Whereas you can be charging really high prices, especially in any big city, and your reviews can be shocking. And, automatically, if you put your rate down at this time of the year, because obviously we're all going to be looking for business, then you're going to get this whole expectation of, well, I'm only getting what I'm going to pay for. So, it's almost like a balancing act when it comes to a lot of, dealing with a lot of segments for customers in particular. And you need to look at it from different segments as well, your leisure segment and in particular your corporate segment in the coming months, because corporates will come back. They are a little bit more difficult than what leisure people can be, but in the right way, because obviously these people use hotel rooms day in and day out, and it's almost like they're home away from home. So you need to be able to kind of give the good value for the customer on that.
What do you think? What's your take on what's going to happen over the next 3 to 6 months? Will the price of different segments drop as luxury and mid-economy scale hotels start to compete? Do you see any bleeding between segments and pricing? Do you see that as a danger?
Absolutely. And I think that's one thing people need to be very much mindful of, is the fact that, you've got luxury hotels and 4-star hotels that will now come down in price, because obviously they need to tap into that domestic market a lot more, especially in the larger cities. Outside cities, I wouldn't really be very much concerned about the markets out there, because they're already doing quite well for the future. But, you'll find that there's going to be bleeding and hemorrhage. Some places might even hemorrhage, especially in busy cities that would have been exceptional in the past few years when it comes to segments. And you'll find that there's going to be huge leaks, especially in and around the corporates and, the MICE business for the next 6 months for sure.
Susanna, if I may add to that, I think there's also danger when you're comparing to kind of what your competitors are doing as well, and trying to copy, because you might be a 5-star all-suite hotel in a location when you actually don't have anyone matching your product, and you might be surrounded by maybe 3-4-star hotels, and yes, that's what customers are buying, but your costs in that property might be completely different to what budget hotels are offering. So that value proposition is completely different. And also you just can't match those price points that competitors are selling at, because it is completely different price point proposition. It's something you can compare in mind or kind of keep in mind. But I would always say, look at what you're good at, who you appeal to. And I would have normally three different market segments. One is for corporate, another one for group business, because they might be actually just judging by the facilities, could be in different locations. And another one is for corporate and transient corporate and groups. I would have at least three comp sets would work for.
Would you have any? Do you have any advice? I'm just wondering if we can give any advice to any smaller hotels that are competing against those much bigger properties, that they are maybe quite unique, but they've maybe got 40 or 50 bedrooms in London or Dublin or Edinburgh. What advice would you give to them when they are going to be competing, against those 200 to 300 bed stocks where it is going to be about commodity and they cannot drop their price? How do they go about that price versus value and get that communicated across? Any advice do you think we can give some people?
I think it's about content. It's about highlighting what you're so unique and what is so special about the hotel. And again, especially right now, I think there is, would you want to be in a hotel which is crowded with, hundreds of people, or you might actually prefer a smaller property where you feel much more safe and secure with potentially less footfall, and you know that you will be able to have this unique experience, or much better experience staying rather than in a large corporate property. There is always that personal perception and personal preference as well. And as long as you highlight, your product, the services, and what's so special about your property, then why wouldn't you potentially be at the same price point, if not higher, because you're offering something quite unique, and it should be the same possible price point as a larger properties.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think small properties actually have a good opportunity here, because they can really sell the experience in a different way than the large branded hotels, because you can make up a story around the hotel, around the different rooms, around the service. Like your team is, I wouldn't say more engaged, because I'm gonna get some fired.
I think it's more personalized though, because it's
more
smaller.
personalized. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have probably more more stories, more content to do, and that will that's probably what people would look for now. So definitely more.
I think we're using this. We've got a very small property in Kensington, and it's a lovely property. It's only 40 bedrooms. So, we're competing against 300, 400 and 500 bedroom hotels in that particular area, branded and non-branded. And this is actually an independent hotel. And at the moment, one of our marketing techniques that we're doing is we're almost building like a blog story of what you can do around London from the guest perspective, from people who've stayed there before, and also from a staff perspective, like my favorite thing to do on my coffee break, or, so it kind of gives that guest a little bit more to realize that, okay, it's in Kensington, it's right in the middle of London, it's a busy area, but, there's parks to be able to go and walk, and, you're able to go to Hammersmith. There's lots of stuff you're able to do that's, you're encouraging the guest, and you're kind of expanding their horizons when it comes to dealing with, entrapment in a city, if you get me, if they're kind of slightly anxious about traveling.
That's really it. Can we just talk about the mechanics of that? Because it's back to that stop the silos again, isn't it? Where you've got revenue and marketing, and that, the blogging content, identifying, the different segments, what's dropping, your forecasting. How does that conversation happen that you say, okay, we've got this 40 bedroom property, this is what needs to happen? Who drives that decision, and what are the mechanics of it?
I think that will be through, continuous conversations, whether it's going to be on revenue meetings. I think it's kind of ongoing conversation, and you would have your strategy plan for a year ahead, and within the months, within the weeks, you would slightly adjust it as whatever's happening in marketing, you need to kind of adjust time to time. But it's ongoing conversation, and it's completely different strategy, and equally to the point where large properties, they have much larger inventory. Therefore, they will be going after large group bookings, the conference bookings, whatever it might be. So it's a different market segments, and the price point should be different as well.
Yeah, and I think it's conversation, in our group, we're a very small group, we're very small, tight knit. So it's only me that kind of deals with that kind of commercial aspect. But, we've had conversations, myself and the group head of operations and our ops guy as well. And we've kind of figured out the best way around doing this and engaging the GM as well, just to get the staff a lot more on board. We've had Zoom calls with the staff, even though people have been on furlough, to get their opinions and get their perceptions, which is really cool, because that keeps you in touch point and it's stopping the silos. The staff actually feel like they're actually giving something back. And that's something that we've been very much engaged with since I've joined the group, is listening to the staff, what they're saying on the front desk, because they're the people who know the people who are coming to stay with us on a daily basis. I'm only in and out of that hotel once a week, whereas these people are there every day.
It's
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
hook
and I
to book.
think-
It's the hook to book, isn't it? It's that hook to book.
Yeah.
What's going to get them through the
Yeah.
door?
But also it's
Price
that
and value.
engagement from staff where they are around that area. They might be leaving or commuting to work, and they might be able to see, they should become ambassadors for hotel, for the brand, and they can share really exciting stories and beautiful images because you have access on a daily basis.
We've got a question from Julie Grieve. Hi, Julie. Julie says, I've heard conversations around the positioning of 4-star, which are very focused on corporate. Do the panel have any thoughts? So we've kind of touched on that, but have we got any more thoughts on that? 4-star hotels, which are very focused on corporate, what do they do?
They go after the corporate market segment.
I think
for now, even though you're
reinventing their guests, so they do have a lot of corporates, definitely. However, they can be really attractive, and they can to a lot of other people, and all those 4-star guests, for example, that may have been going abroad. Well, this time they may want to actually discover a city around, etc., and then that's where they can really try to attract those. And corporate will be back at some point, probably, maybe in a different way. We need to rethink it, but it will be. I think a lot of things that sales has to do with sales, and it's a joint work, but it's really listening to what your clients are looking for. So whether it's your corporates and your leisure, and not only rely on what were the guest preferences in the past, which are great, and we have TripAdvisor and all those tools to tell us what people are saying about us, but it's also now, like more than ever, really get the fresh feedback from everybody to try to tap into the market and like give them what they want, basically.
So repositioning is a thing, but then secondly, if the corporate hotels are traditionally your EDR on corporates is slightly lower, how much pressure does that put on your property if they're you're in competition with them? They can sell cheaper, can't they? Because they're typically usually running at a lower rate. That's a challenge.
Yeah. And that brings us to the whole thing of actually not looking constantly at the hotel next door.
Yeah,
stop looking at the hotel next door. If they, this whole rate war, if they drop £1, I have to drop £1. Oh no, they're £5 cheaper than me today. They might have a complete different product to you. Everyone has different hotels, everyone has USPs. And I think that's something that people need to be very much focused on. Just because a 4-star luxury hotel right next door is charging £300 for a junior suite and you're the same price, it might be your last room. You don't have to constantly be liquidating yourself just because they're doing it as well. And that's something that people need to be very much mindful of going into the new world, because we've just spent so long watching all the hotels in our comp set on a daily basis. And that's what revenue management is. But, it's about also knowing your worth. It's just like you as a person, when you go for a job, it's you knowing your worth.
Yeah. We also touched base a few weeks ago. Sorry, Suzanne, thank you. We also touched a few weeks ago on the point that the companies that used to produce in the past a quite large volume, they may not be producing the same volume going forward, because a lot of companies had gone through the quite significant changes. The travel will look different. Therefore, you might be, even if you're a corporate hotel, you still need to look at the different market segments. Yes, go after the corporate, but attract all other market segments as well. And I bet corporate segment will look completely different once it bounces back. It will be different new corporate accounts. And maybe, why not focus on more government embassies? There is a whole lot of other segments, the group business. And I'm seeing still inquiries for group business, and talking to my colleagues in the industry, there is still a fair amount of inquiries going around.
Olga, you've just lined up my point so nicely. Market segmentation, in my world, when you're looking at a market segment, you make sure that behind each segment, not only is it split down by budget, but you're looking at sales actions, marketing actions, HR, what training your team need operationally in order to facilitate and deal with that size of business that's coming through the doors. And it's hugely important that we stop the silos. And I'm still really curious about who the emerging leaders are going to be when we come out of the changing environment that we're just about to see. Okay, so
we're always able to vocalize.
So the next thing, I guess, when it comes to your competition is the benchmarking and how guests compare your hotel and the perception of your hotel, and then what you do in order to benchmark, so what you think. So let's just share what our views on that are. Here we go. Can everyone see that yet? So how do guests compare your hotel to their perception of the competition? Let's just wait for it to come up. I think what's quite interesting about benchmarking is there are so many ways to do it, so many tools, so many views. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, not yet.
No?
Yeah, I think it's, with the likes of TripAdvisor, who I think were the first and kind of still the biggest. When I was in Cranfield University, I was surprised. We did research and we found that actually 85% of my peers would actually make decisions or based on reviews on TripAdvisor, where as a hotelier, I would not. And that was really kind of surprising statistics to me because it's very personal, I think, reviews, and our expectations are so different from one to another. But it's a good, I suppose, platform to see what are the potential pitfalls, what are potential issues might be in a hotel. And I think it's a good platform to also, if you have a concerns, reading reviews, you have concerns, to contact hotel and to find out, whether it is the case or not. Yeah, I'm surprised, and TripAdvisor is only one of the reviews platforms that we're using. So we can see the screen now. I mean, we've heard the news from Bookings.com this week or last week that they will be removing some of their options, and one of them is actually market analysis and benchmark analysis. So it is a tool that hoteliers could be using, where you see hotels that customers are booking instead of their property, which is very interesting because when I looked at those stats, you have, even if you have several comp sets, always on Bookings.com, you have additional hotels that you wouldn't consider, which just shows that, customers are making their decisions kind of based on the different factors. Whether it is price or location or something else, it's really difficult to predict. Right now, Bookings.com removing that opportunity, right? Hotels will go back to, I think, other platforms available. I think it will be very interesting also to ask our audience what are the systems that they're using to identify kind of customer reviews, benchmarking, what they're using. Expedia has something quite similar. I've used personally Revenate. I think you ladies mentioned also Medallia. Can't comment on Medallia because it's not the platform I've used. In my personal experience, we would go through reviews once a month, where we'd have a monthly report, and we would include that into a monthly report, because then you kind of, and if you have opportunity to kind of factor the by segment as well reviews, that's fantastic. And normally you would have from your from the corporate, from the group business, you would have some sort of feedback as well as from individual reservations. So it's really good to put it all together and to identify whether you need to make any changes. And interestingly, we talk about price proposition and how it is valued by customer. It could be 3-4-star hotel in a summer, and they're really maximizing and yielding. But as soon as they're getting above the price point the customer is prepared to pay or seeing as good value for money, after straight away you will see the reviews going down, because that you failed, you performed below customers' expectations. So that, I think that's really important to keep in mind as well.
How do you see the TripAdvisor evolving? It's tried to change its platform quite considerably over the last year or two, and it hasn't really worked. People still really see it as a review site. Hoteliers detest it because there's no transparency. Guests can't see, the whole getting into the Google hotel space. How do you think it's going to change its model going forward, and will it maintain its relevance?
I think if you notice, actually, since everyone's been on furlough and on lockdown for quite some time, I think it's interesting is a lot of our industry colleagues has been testing TripAdvisor, even though the hotel has been closed, by putting up fake reviews just to prove that they are fake. which TripAdvisor have started to actually look into a lot more themselves. I don't think they're going to change their model, only because their model has worked for a very, very long time, very well for them. I think what they will do is will kind of reinvest more in the whole book direct through TripAdvisor type thing. They tried this a few years back and it worked okay. Then it became a meta site and that's kind of working okay. So I think that's their next thing, because they do want to kind of tap into Google. But I think now with the likes of Alexa, Amazon, Google being able to book rooms soon, I think you'll see people move away from TripAdvisor and relying a lot more on the real reviews on the likes of Google and everywhere else that are slightly more reputable. But I think the one thing that we'll never see the back of is customers who believe that they can actually, use it as a tool to be able to get something for free. Pretty much threatening a hotel by leaving a bad review. And I'd like to think that eventually we'll be able to walk away from that type of thing as well. And that a lot more reviews will become more real time rather than after a stay. Just like a lot of the other OTAs have done in the past. When you check in, you kind of leave a review based on that type of thing. Because sometimes you can forget elements of your stay, or else you can have a fantastic stay and it's ruined by queues on checkout on a Sunday, or a really bad experience with parking, even though the parking is not part of the hotel. And that can just change your mindset completely.
Who should be making the updates and controlling the content on these review sites? Who should respond? Who should be checking the content on TripAdvisor? Who should be checking Booking.com? Whose responsibility? Where does that accountability lie, do you think?
Well, I think it's becoming, with all of the OTAs having something for their customers or platforms, it's becoming increasingly difficult to manage because just the sheer volume of work required. Customer reviews, I think, historically been managed by operations team, whether it is duty managers, general managers, operations managers, etc. I think the responsibility lies across a number of departments. In terms of content on OTAs, I think revenue is still partially responsible for that. And it is still, again, talking about not working in silos. It should be working together. If I would get notifications usually on my email if there was a negative review, and I would straight away communicate and would be addressed straight away. So it really depends how tight communication and relationship is in the property. I would say it's a number of people, and again, it's quite complex.
And how much personality should we be putting into those replies? TripAdvisor can be stored.
Yeah,
lots of fun.
Personality. That's the worst when you have a copy paste, and that's why for me, I would disagree on before Olga. Actually, for me, revenue may have an overview, etc., but the communication needs to be done by the front office or the team that are actually talking to the guest, or the GM, of course, when you want to give this extra love to the client that is not happy. But it's quite important that it's really the people that have handled the complaint, for example, that are on the day-to-day that are able to react also and retrain the team if we realize, look, there's always an issue with, I don't know, pre-authorization form, for example, or whatever. And then that's something that they can really address directly within the department.
Sure. If I may point out or may explain myself, Berenger, in terms of content, images, content, what's descriptions on those online travel agencies, I think it's still responsibility for the revenue director or manager to manage. Reviews, replies, that's probably operational team, because I think they have a skill set that is much more suitable for that. But in terms of what I still think revenue managers should be aware what reviews hotels are getting, because it impacts straight away how much business or how much or little we get. So it's important. It's the same as brand campaigns, value proposition for the customer. It's really important.
Okay, so we're going to take one question before we whiz through to tech tools and systems, because we all want to talk tech, don't we? Christina, you as an independent hotelier of a boutique hotel, what do you think the best way is to get new guests into your property? Is it pricing, marketing, or a combination of both, or more?
So I think it's definitely a combination of both. And I think it also starts with you having a really good website. So if your content isn't great on your website, now is the time to start optimizing that and optimizing your pictures. Get some pictures taken while your hotel is quiet and start putting up special offers to do with that. It's about writing a story. Content is key so key at this moment in time. And, you know, you're writing the story, explaining the locations and being able to push your property, push it on all social media channels. For instance, recently I was actually chatting to someone who never had social media in a lot of their properties before. They've just installed social media recently and they've instantly got a good traction, where as soon as the hotels are now being able to open on the 3rd of July or the 4th of July in the UK, they've seen a huge amount of bookings. And that's just because they started book the first 10 rooms and you pay £50 or something like that for each night. So, you know, they went about it doing that way. And it's a good way of doing it because, again, word of mouth, we all know this, word of mouth is key. It's usually word of advice now, but you don't have to rely on the OTAs as heavily as what you needed to in the past. That's just my personal opinion as well. You have a really good product, know your product, know the position, the price, and use all that in a combination to be able to push your property to the next level.
Fabulous. Okay, so we'll move on to tech tools and systems. I know we've all got our views and opinions on this, so I'll just share the screen so the audience can see what we're about to. There we go. Right.
We also had some feedback on OTA insights being mentioned by one of our listeners, which is great.
Yeah, that's an opportune, isn't that? OTA insight right now, the Booking.com decisions, that's good. Okay, so just leading on from the benchmarking, I think it's quite important that we touch on the other tools that hoteliers use. Christina, you talked yesterday about the STR and the forward star. Do you want to just explain how you use data?
Yeah, so we obviously have so much data just to our hand and so many tech systems and tools that we use. But one of the tools I always use is the STR. I'm always looking at it to see how I'm doing against my comp set. In particular, if I'm falling behind in the comp set, why am I falling behind in the comp set? That's my biggest question. If I'm not number one, I'm not happy. Everyone in the office knows that. There's a benchmark in our office for it. But I think one of the cool tools the STR has really gone with in the last while is their forward star. For a long time, they were trying to push their market segmentation, but not really everyone was comfortable in the hotel world to put in their market segments, so that we kind of had an idea of what the market was doing. So this whole forward star now is a great way of looking to see how you're comparing to the hotels in your market comp set that is submitting the data for 360 days ahead. So it actually shows you your business on the books versus them. Now, all it is just you're showing how many rooms you've actually sold within the 365-day period. And they do the same thing. There's no finance involved, but it's a great way of actually seeing if you're actually missing out, especially in them long booking windows that all our OTAs are always constantly on about, in particular for different emerging markets. So you're able to kind of pinpoint where you actually need to action. And if you kind of find, especially on event dates, you don't have as much business as them, maybe it's that you're priced too high, or maybe you're completely shut out. So it's a great way of looking forward. But I can definitely recommend, if you're not using that, get in contact with STR today, start doing it, because now more than ever, we need to see what's going on in the future.
Fabulous. Now, we've touched on the price shopping tools. So if anyone who's viewing wants to flag up what their favourites are and we can touch on that, then please do. So the price shopping tools, especially with the abolition of Booking.com's rate intelligence and some of their booking suite, how are we going to move forward? What is our plan?
I think we had this conversation yesterday, and not everyone uses Booking.com's revenue systems. Not everyone uses the Expedia revenue system. We all have our own systems that we use, whether it's Avail Pro, it's Rate Tiger, it's Rate Shoppers. I think now is the right time for good rate shoppers to come into the market. There's one or two really good ones that someone has actually mentioned as well. I think we all use it, which is OTA Insight, and Ideas uses it as well. Find a price tool that can shop everything. That's the one thing, member pricing, all these different discounts, point out parity in a complete different way for us. That I can actually, there is one on the market that actually sends you screenshots off your parities, which is great. So if you actually have a parity, it actually sends you that actual screenshot from the link, almost like Booking.com what they used to supply to us in the past, that shows exactly what time it was shopped, where it was shopped, and who was actually selling it on as well. You need to invest heavily for that, but I definitely would. If I could go back and do all this stuff from the start, I would heavily invest in those type of tools, because that helps you shut down the problem makers.
Yeah.
And then just moving.
Careful though, because it's like rate shoppers are great, but it definitely shouldn't be the heart of your strategy. And I think that's kind of like easy to fall into that work path and start really looking at your competitors. And as we said before, like, do you have the right competitors? Is this set the right one to look at this point in time for this type of segments? So I think it's good if you use it as an indicator for the rate shoppers, but definitely, like, they may have, I don't know, few rooms at the lowest price, for example, and the majority of their capacity is on the highest one. So it's a little bit tricky, and I think sometimes we rely a little bit too much on that and on I mean, overall, actually, because even maybe STR, like, it's a great tool, it's amazing, I think, but should it be what we look at all the time? Not necessarily. I mean, you want to be number one, and that's great, but sometimes it's not too bad to be number two or number three. It all depends on which set you have and what kind of tool yourself, basically.
Okay, so
will achieve great combination if you use price shopping tool, if you use revenue management system, and you position where you would like to see, and then you also have information by market segment, what you have on the books, and you have a step forward. So by combining all of the four, you usually use number of systems anyway, so that's how you probably will get the best price point for your property as well. Considering
that's why you
I think it's important to remember as well, all these price shopping tools are just scrapes of websites as well, so it may not be your true price. So if you are into any virtual credit cards or any extra discounts with any of the OTAs that it's supposed to be hidden, they might get leaked, and that just comes up. So your head office will see it and they start asking questions, because sometimes head offices or big corporate offices only focus on what they see on OTA Insight. And that is a problem as well that we face going forward in the future.
I think we're all, everyone, and even the viewers now as well, I think we're all saying the same thing, really. It's so complex. So really quickly then, we're just going to touch on RMS and the CRM. So RMS, I think we touched on this last week about revenue management systems. I'm just going to go round the screen, yes or no. B, RMS, yes or no? Would you use, would you prefer to use? Yes.
But be careful, because I wouldn't use competitors in RMS systems. Definitely
Olga?
not.
Yes.
Christina?
100% agree with B on how to manage it.
Amazing. And then just the last one, the role of the CRM, the customer relationship manager. Who controls it? How should it be used? And how is it relevant to revenue management?
So relevant to revenue management, because it helps actually give you a price guide and quality of your property. So it kind of gives you some sort of an idea or a starting point of what the customers think of you.
Any other views?
Yeah, because it impacts straight away your business. You need to be aware what's happening and how to impact, how to predict customer behavior, but also what to do about certain elements of the business that in order to gain more business and to make it more profitable. So yeah, it's very relevant.
They go together, really. I mean, if you want your CRM to work, you need to know your business anyway. There's no point of doing like a big batch and stuff like that. You need to understand your business, have your targets and your commercial strategy well set up, and then you can really use it efficiently, I think.
Fabulous. Okay, so we'll wrap it up there. Thanks, everyone. Just to touch on a couple of points. On Thursday, the WHTT session is our Innovation in Hospitality, not to be missed. We'll be talking about changes and the effects of the coronavirus kicking in, so I think we'd all want to be watching that. We'll look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday at the same time. And don't forget, you can follow us on LinkedIn and now on Instagram. We're everywhere, so we can engage in conversation there. Thanks very much, everyone. See you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.